I can't help but think of healing the mind at this time without thinking of COVID and how that has drastically changed so much of our world and so much of the world for children and elderly. And so when thinking about these reflections, I looked at the CDC website and they shared this about COVID and children. It says children and young people's social, emotional, and mental health during coronavirus. COVID-19 can affect children and young people directly and indirectly. Beyond getting sick, many young people's social, emotional, and mental well-being has been impacted by the pandemic. Trauma faced at this developmental stage can continue to affect them across their lifespan. When I thought of that, I thought about kindergarten kids or even children a little younger who, when they go to school, that's when they're first actually becoming socialized. That's when they're first learning how to speak. That's when you're seeing a lot of development that they can't get at home because some of that development just happens by them being with other children. So what are happening to those types of kids today? Or even for older kids who may be in high school or middle school, they're missing out on proms and homecomings and these social activities which we don't look at it maybe as significant in different generations, but what are those pillars and those significant moments in life when you take those things away from it? Those are your fondest high school memories. These are your fondest middle school memories that a lot of these kids are missing, even with high school athletes. Imagine you were a freshman or a sophomore or a junior and you spent your senior year not playing that sport that you probably would have gotten a scholarship for. So my heart goes out to just that age demographic and how they're being affected, because it's so drastically different than if you lived in a world as an adult, post-COVID versus you've only lived in this world as a child and now COVID hits, and how much that changes things that are significant. Another thing that I thought about was considering what's happening with elderly, and it's not necessarily due to the age, it's more so the stage in life. And what I saw was that the CDC was saying among adults, the risk for severe illness from COVID-19 increases with age, of course. With older adults at highest risk, severe illness means that the person with COVID-19 may require hospitalization, intensive care, or a ventilator to help them breathe, or they may even pass. It says risk for severe illness increase with age. As you get older, your risk for severe illness from COVID-19 increases. For example, people in their 50s are at a higher risk for severe illness than people in their 40s. Similarly, people in their 60s or 70s are in general at higher risk for severe illness than people in their 50s. The greatest risk for severe illness from COVID-19 is among those 85 and older. But that made me also think, what if this person who is elderly by any account of these numbers, 40, 50, 60, 80, doesn't matter, but they're older and they're already living alone. Say they're not living with a significant other, don't have children, or maybe have children, but they're not in close proximity of them, and now they come down with this illness. Who's going to care for them? Especially if they're already not kind of in a state where they're receiving round-the-clock care. Now who's going to step in and be able to care for them? Who's in a financial predicament to be able to do that? A lot of people are working from home, but does that mean they can pack up and move to take care of an aging parent or aging aunt or uncle? These are concerns that I think about. And even with somebody who's elderly being on a fixed income, how are you going to afford around-the-clock care now that you need more assistance and you're having issues breathing and have a ventilator? And so these are some of the things I thought about when I thought about healing the mind in this specific time period, and just how important it is now more than ever that people not just create support systems, but maintain the support systems they have. How much more significant that seems now than it did before, because these are things that can really change somebody's mental well-being. It's just having good support. And that could be through friends or family or even, their church, different activities they're involved in. But I'm going to put both of those links from the CDC in the chat so that everybody can have them.
Well, as I was thinking about healing the mind, I started thinking about the theology of healing the mind. My background has been a psychotherapist. And as a psychotherapist, it was, you drilled into me that you look at the genetics and physiology, which we refer to as nature, and environmental issues, which we refer to as nurture. And which of those impact a person's challenges, mental difficulties, symptoms. So as we look at nature versus nurture, it's important, I think, to share with you a couple of things. First of all, I want to share that we all have some predispositions for certain disabling mental symptoms. For instance, we could have in our DNA a predisposition for physiologically based depression or affective disorder, like depression or mania, or a psychotic type disorder, schizophrenia or paranoia. With this predisposition, as a psychotherapist and as a member of a team of mental health practitioners, we would look at the symptoms and try and treat the symptoms with a combination perhaps of some medication if we felt like that was warranted, to help the patient manage their symptoms. That's what the medication is really for. It's not to cure the person, but to manage help them manage the symptoms. And then psychotherapy, to teach them the skills that would help them better be able to manage their own personal symptoms. Now, nature is physiologically based, but nurture can be just as debilitating. Nature, we think, if they have a genetic predisposition for schizophrenia, that this is going to be really debilitating. But nurture can also, the environment, the situations people are in, can be just as debilitating. Think of post-traumatic stress disorder. If a person is exposed to an extreme situation that causes them extreme distress, it can result in, symptoms not too dissimilar to what they might if there's a physiological reason for this. Restricted lifestyle, depression, delusions, low tolerance for stress. Now, as a psychotherapist, as a mental health worker, we look at these symptoms and we try to find what will help the patient to manage the symptoms. We're helping them to heal themselves, not to cure the illness. Okay? And I just wanted to be very clear about that. So I wanted to bring theology into the mix now. Okay, so with healing, we talk about, teaching the person or helping the person to manage their whole self. They might use meditation, they might use exercise, they might use self-talk. There may be a variety of strategies. But if they have some sort of physiologically based or environmentally based mental difficulty that results in symptoms, this will not just affect their mind, it'll affect their whole selves, including their spiritual self, their ethical self, all the aspects that we consider as we look at their own personal theology. I think it's probably best, let me start with defining theology, because everybody may have different definitions of that. So, first to say, theology is about making meaning. Okay? About making meaning of our world, of how we interact with the world, about who we are, meaning. All of this is what we would call our personal theology. And the definition I want you to consider as we move forward with this is that it's a comprehensive set of one's truths, beliefs, and purpose. And that could be gotten from a religious background or spiritual beliefs or moral or ethical understandings of the world, one's belief in a divine or not, one's belief in an afterlife or not, one's belief in sin or karma or any specific spiritual or religious belief or lack thereof. All of these things that I'm talking about help us to make meaning. Or we use them. Maybe a better way to say it is we use them to help us make meaning, including, our own experiences in the world. All of these help us to make meaning. So how do we make meaning of a psychological symptom that we may have? And how will that symptom impact the meanings that we make? Our truths, our purpose, our spirituality. If a person were to believe that their symptoms are a result of having done something bad or evil, a sin or some karmic payback, this belief or meaning that we've made can make it more challenging for a person to heal or become whole. They might think they deserve the symptoms that they have and have little motivation to heal or manage their symptoms. If a person believes that they are helpless to get control over their symptoms because there is no cure, again, that's a belief. This can result in low self-esteem, low motivation to try to manage the symptoms, frequent relapses. These things are interconnected. I want to give you an example of a situation from my past psychological experience. And we'll just making this person up to some extent, but she's an accumulation of some patients I've had. And we'll call her Edith. Edith came to therapy to save her marriage. She was a Protestant Christian with strong beliefs in issues like pro-life, marital fidelity, keeping a family together, despite the challenges that any family will have. However, she had an affair, and she got pregnant. And then her husband decided he wanted to divorce her and take the kids. She was so desperate. She volunteered to have an abortion to keep her marriage and family together. She was so desperate she's willing to forego her own personal beliefs, her theology, in order to save her marriage. She felt she had sinned and doomed herself to suffer now and in the afterlife for what she'd done. Everything that had been foundational to her worldview had been pulled out from under her. And she developed depression and anxiety. For a while, she wasn't able to make decisions or even know what to believe. All she could hold on to was how could she save her marriage. Nothing else mattered. Now, if you or me and you're psychotherapists and you're going into that situation, you might think, okay, well, I'll send her in the psychiatrist, see if she might get some medication to help her stabilize for a while, and I need to help her manage these depressive symptoms and all that. But often in our society, we don't consider, either as a psychotherapist or even as the person themselves, some of the underlying things that will help prop up that person, to help them become a whole again. Like that she may need some existential or theological underpinnings, recreate some new underpinnings to hold her again, to help her rebuild a worldview, and to make meaning of what she's experienced so that she could move forward in her life. No psychological symptom is so discrete that it only impacts one insular part of a person. Whether the origin of the issue is nature or nurture, the whole self is impacted. And that includes the spiritual, the ethical, the religious parts of the self. And at least from my perspective, we have to treat those parts, help the person heal those parts as well for them to be whole.
Today you will have the opportunity to not only donate to this congregation, but also to the Red Cross. We will be splitting the plate. The youth chose this nonprofit because of the work the Red Cross is doing for those who have been impacted by the wildfires across the western United States. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place and the work we do in the world. This congregation is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope. We are now the keepers of the dream.
I'm going to share with you a passage from the Hebrew Bible to start. As I was thinking about how to heal the mind, this passage came up for me. And I thought I'd read it before we went into the meditation. It's the story of the passage about Jacob wrestling with an angel. And however you frame that for yourself, I guess I think of it in terms of how we wrestle with our own personal struggles internally, mental, physical, emotional. But as we think about the healing the mind today, this is the passage that really called to me. So I want to read it, and then we'll do our meditation, and I'll share that with you. The same night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jacob. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything he had. Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck Jacob on the hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as they wrestled. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." So the man said to Jacob, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." The man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked the man, "Please tell me your name." But the man said, "Why is it you ask my name?" And there the man blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon Jacob as he walked away, limping because of his hip. Think about that for a moment. When you're affected by mental symptoms, it's not that you're the same. There is something that's affected. That will always have been will always be affected. So, Unitarian Universalist Reverend Sean Parker reflected on this passage as he was thinking about his own struggles. And let me share what he wrote. And as we do this, think of this, if for him this was a prayer. And so I ask us to move into that time of prayer or meditation as we listen to his words and the space between those words. You might take a deep breath, or let your hands rest in your lap or in your heart space, whatever feels right for you. And turn your attention inside, listening to what stirs as we move into this space. Today I wrestle with angels. Perhaps, like Jacob, I will win this fight. But I know full well that nothing is without cost. I will be changed by the struggle. I will never be the same. Today I open my heart to that mysterious beauty we call love, and try to understand its stubborn, grandiose vastness. It has taken me at least half a lifetime to welcome such love into my own life. To accept that I am wholly and relentlessly loved, regardless of my faults or errors, that I will be forever loved extravagantly. Never, never will love fail me. But even more, love will never fail me. Today I struggle to stretch myself so that I can hold, for even one brief moment, a vision of love that fails no one. A love that can redeem the irredeemable, comfort those whose suffering appears beyond comfort, and when rejected, grow ever more vast, ever more patient, ever more ready to forgive. In struggling to know this unfathomable love, may my heart be stretched and open, making room for more love. More love. Ever more love. Amen. Shalom, and blessed be. Well, I guess you could call this the unscripted version of where we are in this service now. So Shae and I are going to question each other, and then we'll take some questions from you as we think about healing the mind. I wondered, Shae, if you have any comments or questions for me, or and then I can ask some questions of you, and then kind of discuss where we are. Anything that I said that particularly was something that you had a concern, question, thought about?
Well, I kind of saw a place where both of our thoughts connected. And speaking of people who may have something predisposed DNA-wise, in their nature, but then also due to how they're being nurtured, it's not assisting with that issue. So to kind of tie it together, for example, say some kids who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, who weren't doing well in school, now they're home. And so those same parents who were working 2 jobs are still working 2 jobs. No one's there to supervise that kid, make sure they're doing their schoolwork. They might have already been having issues in school. So now that nurturing part to something that may be a nature, but maybe they had ADHD, maybe they had, something just, some type of nature thing that their parents had, and now they also have it, but then they also lack that nurture that helps them overcome whatever that case may be. So I just saw kind of that parallel make me think about how that issue can become compounded, depending on circumstances, and especially with what we got going on now with the pandemic.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I'm wondering, for instance, about people at home right now. We're quarantined. The COVID-19 is escalating. We're moving into a time that would normally be a celebratory time, a time of family and gatherings and loving and supporting. I think of it as a time when people fill their emotional tanks up. You know, it's a loving, caring time for many people. So that you have this experience of being loved and with your family, so that you can go back out into the world and be able to face the stresses that you might have to face. And now that resource that we have had that helps us emotionally, spiritually, even I think physically, psychologically, is not there. And so, you know, we're stuck. We're stuck at home. We're stuck at seeing each other over the internet. I mean, my family and I are talking about putting the family on our television set so we can see the family, all of our family, while we're all eating together. And while that's well and good, I wonder if it's really meeting the emotional and spiritual needs that people have, that we really, you know, that are part of what hold us together psychologically, spiritually, physically. And I guess I wonder too, you know, as you were talking about the predisposed illnesses, one of the things that I know is that even though you have something that's predisposed inside you, it doesn't mean that it's going to activate. It doesn't mean that it's actually going to come out in your life. The symptoms are not necessarily going to manifest in your life. But under a lot of stress and without the resources we normally have to help care about ourselves, we're more vulnerable to some mental symptoms. One more thing, and then I'll turn it back to you for a second, Shae. But I was watching on the news the other day of these people who put up plastic sheets and put plastic arms through the sheets so that they could hug one another, and particularly people who are vulnerable populations, because that feeling of being hugged is so, and being touched is so central to our psychological, emotional, spiritual welfare, that people have come up with ways that we could be in contact with each other. What do you think?
I mean, you know, there was something that came out this past week, and I can't remember, somebody with, I think it's a newscaster who has a large following, and this person was saying that she was looking at the coronavirus and her safety precautions for herself, but when her significant other contracted corona and she had to care for this person, I'm sure some people that's watching are more familiar, but I heard it through another source and I wasn't familiar with her, so I don't recall her name. But anyway, she was saying when she had to care for this person that she cared about, it completely changed her dynamic of how she was protecting herself, because she said it was no longer just about her, it was about the people she cared for, and just not putting them in a compromising state, not risking their lives because she cares so much for them. And I see that aspect and definitely feel like that's a very significant aspect. But when we're talking about healing the mind, I wonder if we take so many precautions to do what everyone is saying, which is keeping our bodies healthy and free of COVID, how will our mind be in the end? You know, especially like you said, some people who may have some things that were already there that they didn't know about, or things that weren't triggered because they weren't under this much stress. They had a different type of support. They were supported maybe when they went to work, or when they did regular activities, or went out on the weekends and met people and had that type of energy and that different communication. Maybe they didn't feel that way then, but now in this isolated state, almost somewhat sometimes feeling like on an island alone, you know, how how long can you be the guy from Castaway? You know, I mean, some people can do it, you know, and it doesn't affect them the same. And some people just can't. You can't go through that long without, like you said, if you got to do the bag or the plastic or what, you know, it's kind of like whatever I got to do just to have that interaction that is keeping me sane, you know, that's keeping me going. So I guess there's no right or wrong. Everybody kind of has to decide that for themselves. But I know for me, I'm already at a high risk of exposure because of my other job, and I can't function not having those interactions like that. It doesn't work well for me. And I do everything I can, you know, to be precautious and take the steps and stay healthy, but I just don't think I would be able to manage too long, you know, not interacting and not seeing people and being able to touch somebody and hug somebody and, you know, feel warm with that company.
You know, as you talk about that, you know, I have gone back and forth on visiting my children over the Thanksgiving and had a plane, you know, reservation, and then canceled the plane reservation when the COVID-19 outbreak escalated, and just seeing the people at the airports all pushed together, and I desperately wanted to be with them, to hold them, and to spend time with them. And I know what you're talking about, Shae, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know the impact that's going to have on me not going to visit them. But I do know the fear of going to visit them seemed to be stronger, to control me more than the desire, the need to go and see them. And I know I struggled with that, as I imagine many people are, as we think about whether to go and visit our families or stay safe in our homes or with the people that we live with, a small group that we, you know, are pod with. It's so challenging. I think it's even more important now that we find the things that do ground us in ways that impact us emotionally, physically, spiritually. You know, I was reading an article just the other day of, you know, we think of prayer and meditation and spiritual as you know, all being the same, but we talk about theological or spiritual. It doesn't mean that it's not available to people who also see themselves as more humanist, who don't necessarily see that there is anything beyond this life, that what we have is this bond we have with one another, and how we care for one another, that love that we share with one another, how we are grounded in that connection, and even if we don't pray or meditate, we still, you know, if we're humanist or or theist or whatever, we still need things that feed the soul at this time, in addition to things that manage the symptoms or problems that we may experience. You know, poetry, music, exercise, the things that mean so much to us, that help keep us healthy and grounded and filled emotionally and spiritually, so that we can face this ongoing isolation the things that are out there in the world that are putting stress on us. I don't know.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's, you know, we talk offline about this all the time, and it's just a back and forth because it's kind of tricky. It's almost like sometimes you get this ideal that the numbers are lower, and I know somebody who knows somebody who went out of town and they're okay, and in time you get comfortable and you think, okay, I'm gonna take this chance, or, you know, I'm gonna go here, or, man, I really want a steak from Outback. You know, they got an outdoor seating area, and we can go and get that steak we've been wanting. You know, it's just, you make these, you try to make these little accommodations to different things that present themselves, but then you still are faced with that question, which is this a risk that I need to take, you know, should take? Will I be okay if it doesn't go as planned, etc.? It's just so much worry within the worry, you know, it's all the possibilities.
If you all have any questions, please ask them. We're going to